They seated me at the children's table at my own cousin's wedding, not metaphorically, literally. A round table near the kitchen entrance, wedged between a 7-year-old who kept flicking his fork and a folding chair that wobbled every time someone walked past. My place card, handwritten in my aunt's looping cursive, read Vivian. +1 area. I hadn't even brought a +1. I smoothed the front of my dress, a simple ivory wrap that I'd grabbed without thinking that morning, and told myself it didn't matter. I knew what I was. I didn't need a seat at the head table to remember it. But then my cousin's new mother-in-law leaned over from the adults' table 6 feet away, looked me up and down the way people examine something they've stepped in, and said, loudly enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "Oh, you're the one who does something with hotels, right? Like housekeeping management or something?" Her name was Patricia. She said it with a smile. I said, something like that, and reached for my water glass. That was the beginning. My name is Vivian Chen. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Sacramento with my mother, my grandmother, and the particular kind of quiet that settles over families who have worked very hard and don't talk about it. My grandmother came to this country with $40 and a recipe for soup dumplings she kept written on the inside of her left wrist, so she wouldn't lose the paper. My mother put herself through nursing school working nights at a gas station. I watched both of them and learned the most important lesson either of them ever taught me, which is this: the people who need to announce their value usually don't have very much of it. I built my first property when I was 24. Not renovated. Built. A 12-room boutique inn on the Oregon coast that I'd financed through 3 years of savings, one very patient investor, and a business plan I'd rewritten 47 times. I slept on a cot in the unfinished lobby for 6 weeks during construction because I couldn't afford to rent an apartment nearby. I learned to read electrical schematics. I learned to negotiate with contractors who didn't take me seriously until the 3rd meeting, when they realized I knew exactly what every line item on their quote actually cost. That inn became 2 properties. 2 became 5. 5 became 11. By the time I was 29, Celadon Hospitality Group, my company, fully mine, managed 11 boutique hotels across the Pacific Northwest and Northern California. We had a reputation for a specific kind of experience: quiet luxury, the kind that doesn't announce itself. No gold fixtures, no marble waterfalls in the lobby. Just exceptional beds, food sourced from within 30 miles, and staff who remembered your name without being told twice. Travel Plus Leisure had called us the most quietly influential boutique group in the American West. Forbes had run a profile I'd asked them to keep short. I didn't attend industry events. I didn't have a personal publicist. I wore simple clothes because I liked simple clothes, and because long ago I decided I had better things to do than perform wealth for people I didn't know. The problem with that, I'd learned, was that some people mistook simplicity for smallness. Patricia Holloway was one of those people. My cousin Rachel had been dating Daniel Holloway for 3 years, and I genuinely liked him every time we'd met. He was warm and funny and clearly devoted to Rachel in the uncomplicated way that good men are devoted to the people they love. His family was a different story. The Holloways were old Sacramento money, or they had been, about 2 generations ago. The kind of family that still referenced ancestors at dinner and kept a framed portrait of a great-grandfather in the foyer, as though proximity to old achievement substituted for current effort. Daniel's father, Robert, had made a comfortable living in commercial real estate. His mother, Patricia, had made a career out of being Patricia Holloway. I'd met her exactly once before, at Rachel's engagement dinner 8 months earlier, where she'd spent 45 minutes explaining to my aunt that the Holloways had a certain standard they hoped Rachel would grow into. My aunt had smiled the entire time with the specific stillness of a woman who had spent decades being underestimated by people who would never understand what she was. I had smiled too. I was good at smiling. The wedding was held at Thornfield Estate, a venue outside of Napa that Patricia had selected and announced as the obvious choice for a wedding of this caliber. It was beautiful, I won't pretend otherwise. Rolling hills, a restored Victorian main house, long tables set under market lights strung between oak trees. Rachel had looked incandescent walking down the aisle, and Daniel had cried before she was even halfway to him, and for the first hour of the reception, I had forgotten entirely about table assignments and Patricia Holloway's opinions. Then dinner was called and I found my place card, and Patricia leaned over and made her comment about housekeeping management and the woman sitting next to her. I would later learn she was Patricia's college roommate, a woman named Diane. Laughed with that particular pitch, "That means we've been talking about you already." I sat down on my wobbling chair and I opened my menu and I said nothing. The table I'd been assigned to was not technically the children's table. It was the overflow table, which in practice meant the guests the Holloways didn't know how to categorize. There was a sweet older man named Gerald who turned out to be Rachel's mother's co-worker. They were two cousins from Daniel's side who were in college and spent the entire meal with their heads bowed over their phones. And there was my grandmother. My grandmother, Nai, was 83 years old and had the posture of a woman who had decided decades ago that she would not be diminished by anything and had kept that promise to herself every day since. She was wearing a deep blue kipao she'd brought from her closet in Sacramento, and when I sat down next to her, she patted my hand twice and said, in Mandarin, "The food will still taste the same from here." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You're not angry?" I asked her in Mandarin. She looked at the Holloways table across the room, Patricia holding court, Robert nodding along, Daniel's two older brothers laughing at something, their wives gleaming in coordinated neutrals. And she looked back at me. "Angry is expensive," she said. "Save it for something worth the cost." I squeezed her hand and looked down at my menu. The starter was a roasted beet salad with goat cheese and candied walnuts. I noticed, in the corner of the menu, the catering credit, Hearthstone Provisions, sourced and prepared in partnership with Celadon Hospitality Group. I had forgotten about that. Hearthstone was the culinary team we built in-house 3 years ago, initially to serve our hotel restaurants and then, at the request of a few event venues we partnered with, extended into private catering for high-end events. Thornfield Estate had been a Hearthstone partner for 2 years, which meant that every plate of food Patricia Holloway was about to eat at her son's wedding had been sourced, developed, and supplied by my company. I set down the menu. I ate my beet salad. It was excellent. The trouble started properly around the time the entrees were served. I had gotten up briefly to find the restroom, and when I returned I found Patricia and Diane standing near my table, ostensibly admiring the floral arrangements on the far wall, but positioned in a way that made it clear they were not there for the flowers. "She does seem sweet," Diane was saying, in the low voice people use when they want to be overheard selectively. "I just think Rachel could have been a bit more thoughtful about the seating. Some of these relatives." "It's a mixed bag," Patricia agreed. She glanced at my grandmother's empty chair. Nai had gone to find Rachel. Different backgrounds, different trajectories. I pulled out my chair and sat down. Patricia looked at me with the composed warmth of a woman who had been doing this for 40 years. "Vivian, I was just saying to Diane, you must be so proud of Rachel. She's really found her footing, hasn't she?" "She has," I said. "She's brilliant. She always has been." "And what is it you do, exactly?" Daniel mentioned something about hospitality. The question was perfectly calibrated. "What is it you do, exactly?" Phrased to imply that what I did required the modifier exactly because it wasn't obvious. Wasn't impressive enough to be self-explanatory. "I work in hospitality, yes," I said. "Property management, event coordinating?" "More the ownership side," I said. Patricia smiled. "Oh, like a rental property? My nephew does Airbnb. Very entrepreneurial." Diane nodded supportively. I looked at Patricia Holloway. I thought about my grandmother's $40 and her recipe written on her wrist. I thought about the cot I'd slept on in the unfinished lobby in Oregon. I thought about 47 drafts of a business plan. "Yes," I said. "Something like that." And I turned back to my plate. I would have let it go entirely. I want to be honest about that. I am not a person who looks for confrontations, and I have spent enough of my life in rooms where I was underestimated to know that most of those rooms don't require a response. You do your work. You build what you build. The people who matter eventually understand, and the ones who don't, we're never going to. What changed the calculation was what happened after dinner. The dancing had started, and Rachel and Daniel had done their first dance, and the floor had opened up, and the lights had gone warm and golden, and for a while, everything was exactly what a wedding should be. I danced with my grandmother, who moved with a grace that made people stop and watch. And I danced with Rachel during a slow song, and she pressed her forehead to mine and said, "I'm so glad you're here." And I meant it when I told her I wouldn't have missed it. I was at the edge of the dance floor catching my breath when I heard the conversation. Daniel's older brother, his name was Carter, and he was the kind of man who had rowed crew in college and mentioned it regularly, was talking to two of his friends near the bar. I was partially behind a floral column, and I don't think he knew I was there. Honestly, Daniel married well on the personal side, but her family is a lot, Carter was saying. The grandmother barely speaks English. The cousin does something vague with hotels. Which cousin? One of his friends asked. The one in the plain dress. Vivian. Mom looked her up and couldn't find anything. Like, no LinkedIn, no company page, nothing. I think she's probably exaggerating whatever she does. Classic, his friend said. Daniel doesn't care, which, good for him, I guess. But Mom's worried about what it looks like, you know? The Holloways have a name. There's an expectation. I stood very still behind the floral column. I thought about the catering credit on the menu. I thought about the Thornfield Estate Partnership Agreement, which had been negotiated and signed by my VP of Partnerships on behalf of Celadon Hospitality Group 14 months ago. I thought about the fact that Carter Holloway worked as a regional account manager at a company called Meridian Hotel Solutions, which had been a vendor partner of Celadon for 2 years, providing linen supply services to 4 of our properties. I knew this because I had approved the vendor contract myself. I took a breath. Then I went to find my phone. I texted my chief of staff, a woman named June who had been with me for 4 years and who I trusted completely. I typed, quick question, is Carter Holloway still listed as the account manager on the Meridian linen contract? Her response came in 4 minutes, yes. Renewed in February. Why? I typed back, no reason yet. Just confirming. I put my phone away and went back to the reception and ordered a glass of sparkling water from the bar and stood there for a moment looking at the room. The market lights strung between the oak trees, Rachel laughing with her new mother-in-law. Daniel's family had been warm with her, whatever they said behind closed doors. The band playing something that made my grandmother tap her foot from her seat at the table. I had built something real. I had done it quietly, without asking anyone's permission or validation, and it had grown into something that touched the lives of hundreds of employees and thousands of guests every year. I paid good wages. I sourced locally. I promoted from within. 3 of my current general managers had started as front desk staff. Carter Holloway's family had a name. I had a company. The difference, in my experience, was that a company was something you built. It was Patricia who created the moment, in the end. Not me. The reception was winding toward its close, guests collecting their favors, the band transitioning to slower songs, the older relatives beginning the gentle choreography of goodbyes. I was near the gift table, talking with Gerald from my aunt's office about his retirement plans, when Patricia approached with the collected energy of a woman who had been waiting for a specific opportunity. Vivian, she said with a warmth so practiced it had its own texture. I wanted to apologize if I seemed dismissive earlier. I didn't mean to minimize what you do. Hospitality is so important. Gerald excused himself with the polite instincts of a man who recognized a private conversation forming. No apology needed, I said. I jest. She tilted her head slightly. I looked you up, and I couldn't find much of a footprint. In today's world, I would think someone in business would want more of a presence. I prefer to stay quiet, I said. But how do clients find you? How do people know what you've built? She smiled. I only asked because my nephew is trying to get into the hotel industry, and I thought maybe you two could connect, but I want to make sure it's a small pause. A good use of his time. I looked at her for a moment. Then I said, Patricia, do you see the catering credit on the dinner menu tonight? She blinked. Yes, I think so. Hearthstone something. Hearthstone Provisions. It's the culinary division of my company. We've supplied all the food for this wedding, sourced within 40 miles, prepared by a team I built 3 years ago. She was very still. Thornfield Estate has been a hospitality partner of mine for 2 years, I continued. We consult on their vendor relationships, their guest experience standards, their staff training. The floral team tonight was referred through our partner network. So was the lighting company. I watched her process this. And Carter, I said, keeping my voice even, works for Meridian Hotel Solutions, which supplies linens to 4 of our properties under a vendor contract I approved last February. The color shifted in Patricia's face. Not dramatically. Just a quiet, gradual recalibration. I don't have a large social media presence because I made a deliberate choice not to, I said. Not because there's nothing to find. The company is called Celadon Hospitality Group. We manage 11 boutique properties. You're welcome to look it up. Patricia's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Your nephew, I said, is welcome to reach out through our careers page. We're always looking for people who work hard and treat others with respect. Those are the main requirements. I paused. Both of them matter equally. I picked up my water glass from the edge of the gift table. It was a beautiful wedding, I said. You should be very proud. And I walked back toward my grandmother, Nai was sitting with Rachel's mother near the far edge of the reception space, the two of them sharing a plate of petit fours and talking with the ease of women who had known each other for decades. When I sat down, my grandmother looked at me with the clear, unhurried gaze she'd had my entire life. "You said something," she said. "Not a question." "I said something," I confirmed. She was quiet for a moment. Was it true? Every word. She nodded once, the way she did when an account had been settled correctly. Then she offered me the last petit four from the plate. I took it. It was lemon and lavender, made by Hearthstone's pastry team, and it was perfect. Rachel found me an hour later, when the reception had fully wound down and the guests were filtering to their cars and the staff were beginning the quiet, efficient work of clearing tables. She came across the emptying dance floor with her heels in one hand and her veil slightly askew and the expression of a woman who had just had a very interesting conversation. "Patricia Holloway just looked up Celadon on her phone," she said, stopping in front of me. "I know. Carter turned very quiet about an hour ago." "I noticed." Rachel looked at me for a long moment. Then she put her arms around me and held on, the way she used to when we were small and the world felt too large and complicated, and I held her back just as tightly. "I should have fought harder on the seating chart," she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "The food was from my company," I said. "I ate very well." She laughed, a real one, the kind that came from somewhere unguarded. I felt her relax slightly. "She's going to try to pretend she knew the whole time," Rachel said. "Probably. Does that bother you?" I thought about it honestly. About Patricia recalibrating her smile. About Carter going quiet at the bar. About the Thornfield Partnership Agreement and the Meridian contract and 11 properties built one decision at a time, quietly, without anyone's permission. "No," I said. "What people pretend, privately, is their own business. What matters is what they do." Rachel pulled back and looked at me. Her eyes were bright. "Stay," she said. "For the last dance. The band is doing one more song." So I stayed. I danced with my grandmother again, and she was still graceful, and the market lights were still warm, and somewhere across the thinning crowd Patricia Holloway was holding her phone and reading about a company she'd dismissed 20 minutes ago. I didn't watch her. I was dancing with my grandmother. I had better things to do. The drive back to the hotel where I was staying took about 40 minutes. I had a suite. Not because I was making a point, but because I'd called ahead and the property manager, knowing I was the guest, had upgraded me automatically. I didn't think anything of it. That was just how things worked. I set my shoes by the door and sat on the edge of the bed and called June. "How was the wedding?" she asked. "Good," I said. Rachel was happy. That's what mattered. And the rest of it? I thought about the beet salad and the children's table and the $40 and the recipe written on her wrist. I thought about Carter's voice behind the floral column. I thought about my grandmother eating a petit four and nodding once because an account had been settled correctly. "Fine," I said. "Everything's fine. Do I need to pull the Meridian vial?" "Not yet," I said. "Let's see how they behave." I hung up and looked out the window at the dark hills of Napa, the vine rows just visible in the moonlight. In the morning, I had a call with the development team about a potential 12th property, a historic inn on the Washington coast that had come to us through a referral, the kind of place that needed careful hands. I thought about what my grandmother had said. Angry is expensive. Save it for something worth the cost. I hadn't been angry tonight. Not really. I'd been precise. There was a difference and it mattered, and I had learned at the same place I'd learned everything else, by watching women who had more reasons to be angry than most people ever accumulate and who had chosen, deliberately, to be powerful instead. I closed the curtains. I got into the excellent bed. I thought, 11 properties. One more call tomorrow. The work continues. And I slept.